Had her titles, and she was really the beloved wife of Akhenaten. She didn't have the same kind of honors as Nefertiti did, but she was clearly quite favored because her name crops up again and again.
For over 100 years, the bust of Nefertiti has been known as the most stunning face of the ancient world. Every year, more than 500,000 visitors travel to Berlin just to stand before it. But almost none of them realize they are not actually seeing her true face. In 2009, a team of researchers pointed a hospital-grade CT scanner at the limestone sculpture and asked a question the museum had quietly avoided for nearly a century. What was really hidden inside? The scan revealed an answer that challenged everything written on the display beside it. And after 3,000 years, people have finally begun asking why. The face beneath the surface. For more than a century, the bust has held people under its spell. A flawless oval face. A graceful, elegant neck. One painted eye, calm, timeless, forever youthful. Visitors gather around the glass at the Neues Museum and walk away believing they have seen the face of an ancient queen. But they haven't. What they have seen is a carefully crafted mask. In 1912, a German archaeological expedition excavating Tel El Amarna, the buried remains of Akhenaten's forgotten desert capital, entered the workshop of a master sculptor named Thutmose. There, the team discovered the bust lying on its side beneath the rubble, untouched for over 3,000 years. No inscription. No royal cartouche. No name. Only a face. It took decades of comparing it with surviving temple carvings before scholars agreed that the woman was almost certainly Nefertiti, the great royal wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, who ruled Egypt between 1353 and 1336 BCE. The bust was taken to Berlin, placed behind glass, and eventually became one of the most photographed sculptures in the world. Many years later, researchers decided to see what was hidden inside. They used computed tomography, the same CT scanning technology found in hospitals, but specially adjusted for priceless artwork. It sent X-rays through the sculpture from hundreds of different angles, rebuilding its interior layer by layer without causing any damage. Imagine the scene. A small group of researchers standing silently in front of a monitor. The scan finishes. The first image appears. No one says a word. For decades, art historians believed the answer was simple. A solid limestone core covered with a thin layer of plaster. A refined but mostly accurate royal portrait. That belief disappeared within moments. Hidden beneath the famous painted surface was another face entirely. Carefully carved into the limestone and concealed beneath a few millimeters of plaster was the image of a woman who looked remarkably different from the one displayed in the museum. Her nose was longer and more defined. Small lines appeared around her mouth. A soft crease rested beneath her eyes. Her cheekbones sat at a different angle. Even the two sides of her face were slightly uneven. This was not the flawless queen admired by millions. This was a real woman. And someone had hidden her beneath plaster, replacing her with a different face. A sculptor who deliberately changed the truth. Think about what that means. Thutmose was not an inexperienced artist. He was a master craftsman working directly for the royal court. He first created an honest portrait, slightly older, slightly imperfect, of the most powerful woman in Egypt. Then he intentionally covered it up. To understand why, you first have to understand one of the most unusual periods in Egyptian history. Akhenaten, Nefertiti's husband, did something no pharaoh before him had ever dared. He dismantled the religious system of an entire civilization. He shut down the temples of the old gods. He removed the priests from power and stripped them of their wealth. He declared that only one god deserved worship, the Aten, the visible sun disk, and that only he and Nefertiti could communicate directly with it. He even moved Egypt's capital into the desert and built a completely new city from the ground up. It became the most dramatic religious revolution in 3,000 years of Egyptian history. During that revolution, Nefertiti was far more than a queen. She became the public face of an entirely new belief system. Temple carvings show her standing beside Akhenaten during sacred ceremonies. Others even show her alone, raising a war club above defeated enemies, a pose traditionally reserved only for pharaohs. No Egyptian queen had ever been portrayed like that before. She ruled beside her husband in nearly every way, and perhaps officially as well. The bust was never meant as a personal keepsake. It was a political tool. Its smooth, youthful, perfectly balanced features projected exactly the image a fragile new government wanted its people to see after forcing them to abandon the gods they had worshipped for centuries. The bust did not show Nefertiti as she truly looked. It showed her as the kingdom needed her to appear. What makes this even more remarkable is where archaeologists discovered it. Not inside a temple. Not inside a royal tomb. Inside an artist's workshop. That means it likely served as the master model, a reference used by sculptors across Egypt to produce identical copies. Everywhere people looked, they would see the same carefully controlled image. That is the face the world has admired for more than a century. It is not simply a portrait. It is a carefully designed mask, copied into one of the world's most famous sculptures, printed on postcards, featured in textbooks, and shown to generations of students. Yet beneath every version of that face lies another woman, the real woman, the one the royal court never wanted anyone to see. If the thought that the world's most famous face might actually be a mask has changed the way you see history, then what comes next will change even more. This hidden face is only the first layer of a much deeper mystery surrounding Nefertiti. The queen who was erased. Around the 12th year of Akhenaten's 17-year reign, Nefertiti suddenly disappears. No official announcement. No funeral inscription. No confirmed tomb. The most frequently portrayed woman in ancient Egypt, a queen whose image covered temple walls and palace reliefs, simply vanishes from the historical record. For decades, historians believed she had died from disease or plague, and that time had simply erased the evidence. But archaeology tells a different story. At several temple sites dating to the final years of Akhenaten's reign, researchers found a pattern that could not be explained by natural damage. Nefertiti's name had been deliberately carved out of inscriptions and replaced with another name, not just in one place, but across multiple monuments by people who clearly knew exactly what they were doing. At nearly the same time, another name began appearing in the historical record, Nefertiti, a ruler who briefly governed Egypt between Akhenaten's death and the rise of Tutankhamun. What scholars discovered next surprised many. The grammatical endings attached to Nefertiti's royal titles are feminine. The pronouns are feminine. Even the verb forms are feminine. Whoever Nefertiti was, the ancient inscriptions consistently describe the ruler as a woman. Egyptologist James Allen spent years studying these inscriptions. Allen, along with several other researchers, has built a detailed case suggesting that Nefertiti and Nefertiti were actually the same person, that after Akhenaten's death, Nefertiti took the throne under a new royal name and ruled Egypt herself. Allen points to several clues, including duplicated royal cartouches, unique royal titles, and feminine grammatical endings. There was already historical precedent. Hatshepsut, Egypt's famous female pharaoh, also reshaped her royal identity to secure power. But what happened afterward is even more disturbing. Inside Tutankhamun's tomb, discovered by Howard Carter in 1922, researchers noticed signs of hurried and deliberate alteration. Golden jewelry, coffins, and burial objects all showed evidence that their original inscriptions had been scraped away and replaced. Feminine words were changed into masculine ones. Names were carved out and engraved again. These were not the effects of time. They were marks left by tools used quickly by people determined to erase someone's identity before it could be recognized. The conclusion is difficult to ignore. Many of the famous treasures inside Tutankhamun's tomb may not have been created for him at all. They were likely made for a woman who ruled before him, most likely Nefertiti under the name Nefertiti, and then hastily reused for the young king after an unexpected change in power. Her legacy was not simply erased. It was taken from her, reassigned, and placed in someone else's tomb. But names exist only on stone and metal. You can chisel a name from a wall. You can repaint an inscription. You can place a queen's treasures beside a teenage king and convince a nation they always belonged to him. What you cannot erase, no matter how carefully you try, is the truth hidden beneath the ground. And that truth may still be waiting to be uncovered. The mystery of the broken bones. In 1817, explorers entered a small unfinished tomb in the Valley of the Kings known as KV-21. Inside were two female mummies. There were no names, no royal burial equipment, and no inscriptions identifying them. One of the women, labeled KV-21B, rested with her left arm folded across her chest in the traditional royal pose, her hand curled as if it had once held a scepter. She was clearly a woman of high status. But her identity remained a mystery, and her remains were too damaged for the DNA technology available during the 20th century. For nearly 2 centuries, she remained unknown. In 2022, an international team of researchers used next-generation DNA sequencing, a technique capable of recovering genetic information from samples that older methods could not analyze. They successfully reconstructed KV-21B's complete mitochondrial DNA profile. Because mitochondrial DNA is passed only through the mother's bloodline, it is one of the most dependable ways to trace maternal relationships. The results stunned the researchers. KV-21B shared the same maternal lineage as Tutankhamun. She was not simply a member of the royal family. She was closely related to Egypt's famous boy king through his mother's side. She could have been his mother, aunt, or older sister. When this evidence is combined with the archaeological record, one possibility stands above the rest: KV-21B may have been Nefertiti. But her possible identity was not what shocked the forensic experts the most. Take a moment to picture the real woman. Not the famous bust, the living queen. Standing beneath the bright sun in Amarna, the city her husband built from empty desert, looking across temples that had not existed only a few years earlier. She had already witnessed the death of one of her daughters. She had survived the husband whose religious revolution she helped create. And she likely watched powerful people around her preparing to erase her name from history. Whatever happened in her final days, she may have realized it was coming. Then came the discovery almost no museum display ever mentions. Dr. Sahar Salim of Cairo University, one of the world's leading forensic Egyptologists, performed detailed CT scans on KV-21B. As she carefully examined the images, she noticed injuries that could not be explained by normal decay. Both arms had been broken and forced backward into unnatural positions. The rib cage had been severely crushed. The skull showed fractures along one side with sharp edges, the kind usually caused by a powerful blow rather than thousands of years of pressure from a collapsing tomb. Dr. Salim concluded that these injuries likely occurred at or very close to the time of death. The evidence became even more unsettling. Bones crushed by falling stone usually break in predictable patterns following the pressure of the collapse. KV-21B's injuries did not match those patterns. Arms twisted and broken behind the back are often associated with restraint, suggesting the woman may have been forcibly held. The sharp inward fractures on the skull point toward a heavy object striking with deliberate force. None of these injuries resemble a simple accident. A royal woman from Egypt's 18th dynasty, genetically connected to Tutankhamun's family, buried without a name in a tomb unworthy of her status. A body showing signs of severe and intentional violence. The famous bust displayed in Berlin presents a flawless queen who may never have truly existed. But the remains in KV-21 could reveal the fate of the real woman hidden beneath that perfect face. And the most astonishing part of the story is still to come. The hidden chamber theory. There is another theory about where Nefertiti was finally buried, and it may be even more extraordinary than the idea of a violent death in an unmarked tomb. In 2015, British Egyptologist Nicholas Reeves made an announcement after months of detailed research that shocked the archaeological world. He proposed that Nefertiti's tomb could be hidden behind a sealed wall inside the most famous burial chamber ever discovered, the tomb of Tutankhamun, known as KV-62. Reeves did not arrive at this conclusion through speculation. He spent months examining ultra-high-resolution scans of the tomb walls created in 2014 by the Madrid-based company Factum Arte. Night after night, He carefully enlarged the images, searching beyond the painted surface for details invisible to visitors standing inside the chamber. Eventually, he noticed faint straight lines, subtle outlines, and unusual patterns on the northern and western walls that did not match the natural texture of the limestone. To him, they looked like sealed doorways that had been plastered over and painted to disappear. The evidence became even more intriguing. Tutankhamun's tomb is unusually small for an Egyptian pharaoh, and its layout differs from the traditional design of royal tombs. There are also clear indications that the burial was completed in great haste. Reeves suggested that the tomb had originally been built for someone else, most likely Nefertiti. Then, when Tutankhamun died unexpectedly at around 18 or 19 years old, workers quickly sealed the original burial chambers and placed the young king inside what had once been the entrance section. In 2016, a Japanese research team using ground-penetrating radar detected signals behind the northern wall that appeared consistent with a hidden chamber. Egypt's Ministry of Antiquities acknowledged the possibility, and the news quickly spread around the world. But in 2018, an Italian research team returned with more advanced radar equipment and performed a new survey. Their results suggested that the earlier signals were simply natural variations in the limestone rather than hidden rooms. The two investigations have never been fully reconciled. Some experts point out that radar scans inside dense rock can produce conflicting results depending on the equipment, scanning angles, and interpretation methods. Even so, Nicholas Reeves has never withdrawn his theory. Not once. Egyptian authorities have also refused to approve any physical investigation of the wall. The only definite way to settle the mystery would be to drill through it, but drilling into one of the world's most important archaeological sites is a decision no one is willing to make lightly. So the mystery remains. Nefertiti may still be resting in silence just beyond a thin painted wall that millions of visitors pass every year without ever realizing it. Think once more about the famous bust displayed behind glass in Berlin, a face without a name. And perhaps, hidden deep beneath the Egyptian desert, a body without a marker. Two missing pieces of the same mystery, separated by 3,000 years and an entire continent. The lost daughters of Nefertiti. Erasing a queen requires more than removing her name from temple walls. It also means wiping out the people who would carry her bloodline into the future. And what happened to the 6 daughters of Akhenaten and Nefertiti suggests that someone understood this all too well. Picture the early temple walls of Amarna. 6 young princesses, Meritaten, Meketaten, Ankhesenpeten, Neferneferutin Tasheret, Neferneferur, and Setapenra, appear in nearly every relief. They are shown during family ceremonies, religious festivals, and peaceful moments together, scenes filled with a warmth rarely seen in ancient Egyptian art. Then, after the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, they begin disappearing from history one by one. Start with Meketaten, the second daughter. Around the 14th year of her father's reign, she died. A scene carved inside the royal tomb at Amarna shows her parents standing over her body in open grief, one of the few surviving images of genuine family sorrow from the ancient world. But one detail remains unexplained. Beside the mourning parent stands a nurse holding a newborn baby. The child has no name, no inscription, and is never mentioned anywhere else. Some historians have suggested a disturbing possibility. Meketaten may have died during childbirth, possibly after a marriage within the royal family, a practice Egyptian rulers sometimes used to preserve what they believed was a sacred bloodline. The relief captures a heartbreaking moment forever in stone: a dead princess, an unidentified infant, and parents who had no idea their dynasty was already beginning to fall apart. Then there is Ankhesenpeten, the third daughter. Her story is the best documented, and perhaps the most tragic. After the collapse of the Amarna kingdom, she adopted the name Ankhesenamun and married her half-brother Tutankhamun in a royal marriage meant to strengthen his claim to the throne. Both were still very young. Tutankhamun died without leaving an heir. Desperate, Ankhesenamun made an extraordinary decision. She wrote a letter to the king of the Hittites, Egypt's greatest rival, asking him to send one of his sons to marry her because she refused to marry one of her own servants. The Hittite prince accepted the journey, but he was murdered before reaching Egypt. After that, Tutankhamun disappears completely. No confirmed tomb. No identified mummy. No clear record of what became of the last well-known daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti. The remaining 4 daughters leave behind almost no evidence at all. There are no confirmed records of their deaths, and no mummies have been positively identified as theirs. Of the 6 daughters born to one of Egypt's most influential queens, history preserves only scattered fragments. The missing pieces are simply too consistent to be explained by chance alone. This was more than bad luck. When General Horemheb rose to power after the short reign of Tutankhamun's successor, he launched a determined effort to erase the entire Amarna period from Egyptian history. He did far more than remove names from temple walls. He targeted the people who carried that royal legacy. Without recognized tombs, official funerary traditions, or acknowledged descendants, the bloodline of Akhenaten and Nefertiti slowly disappeared from Egypt's historical record. A nameless bust displayed in Berlin. A possible queen buried anonymously with broken bones. 6 royal daughters fading into silence. This was not simply the work of time, it was a systematic campaign. And it continued, monument by monument, name by name, daughter by daughter, until modern science finally began uncovering the truth hidden beneath the sands. The price of a divine bloodline. When the genetic profile of KV-21b was included in a broader DNA study of Egypt's 18th dynasty in 2022, researchers noticed a particular genetic mutation. It is linked to connective tissue disorders, conditions that weaken the tissues supporting bones, organs, and blood vessels. People with these disorders bruise more easily, suffer broken bones more easily, and can experience severe internal bleeding from injuries that others might survive. When scientists compared this discovery with the evidence of violent injuries found on KV-21b's body, a disturbing possibility emerged. Whoever attacked her may have known just how physically vulnerable she was. They may have realized that wounds which might not kill another person could be fatal for her. But this physical weakness did not appear by chance. In 2010, a major study published in the Journal of the American Medical Association examined DNA from several mummies connected to Tutankhamun. The research revealed repeated evidence of close family marriages across multiple generations of Egypt's 18th dynasty. Royal families often married close relatives because they believed they were protecting a sacred bloodline descended directly from the gods. The biological cost, however, was generations of inherited genetic disorders. Tutankhamun himself is the best-known example. He suffered from a clubfoot, a partially collapsed foot arch, recurring bone disease, and a fragile skeleton. The walking sticks discovered in his tomb were not simply ceremonial objects, they were essential for him to walk. There is another piece of the puzzle. Scientific studies of mummies from the Amarna period have found unusually high levels of mercury, arsenic, and lead in their tissues. These toxic elements were common ingredients in the colorful mineral pigments used throughout Akhenaten's temples and palaces. Long-term exposure to these substances can damage the nervous system, weaken bones, and reduce the body's ability to fight disease. The magnificent, sunlit city that Akhenaten and Nefertiti built, filled with vibrant painted walls and dazzling colors, may have slowly poisoned the very people living inside it. The result was a royal family with weakened immune systems, fragile bones, and shorter lifespans, trying to maintain a religious revolution that much of Egypt was waiting to overthrow. In the end, the dynasty did not collapse because of politics alone. It was also weakened by biology. And no matter how powerful Nefertiti became, she could not escape that reality. The truth behind the face. Now, with everything you've learned, imagine standing once again before the famous bust in Berlin's Neues Museum. Look through the glass at the face the world believes it knows. That sculpture is not simply a tribute to a legendary queen. It is not just a symbol of timeless beauty. It is a carefully crafted object, created during one of Egypt's most unstable periods for a very specific political purpose. It survived into the modern world largely by chance, because it was left behind in a sculptor's workshop when the city of Amarna was abandoned and eventually buried beneath the desert. The outer face is the official version, the image approved by those in power. The hidden face beneath the plaster, revealed by the CT scan, may be closer to the real Nefertiti. But even that remains only stone shaped by an artist's hands. The real woman may instead be the anonymous body found in KV-21. Unnamed. Broken. Buried in conditions unworthy of even a minor royal, let alone one of the most powerful queens in Egyptian history. There is a remarkable irony at the heart of this story. The people who erased her name from temple walls, reused her treasures for another ruler, possibly concealed her tomb behind another king's burial chamber, and removed her daughters from history accomplished almost everything they intended. Her name disappeared from Egypt's records for nearly 3,000 years. Her tomb has never been confirmed. Her daughters left behind almost no trace. But one thing escaped their control. And the reason is almost unbelievable. The bust survived precisely because it had no identity. It carried no inscription. No royal name. It sat forgotten inside a sculptor's workshop, abandoned among the ruins of a city the next rulers wanted erased forever. They ignored it. The desert buried it beneath the sand. Then, 3,000 years later, a German archaeologist uncovered it once again. The very anonymity forced upon Nefertiti after her death became the reason her image survived into the modern age. Yet the bust itself is not Nefertiti. As modern science continues uncovering new evidence, the real woman appears increasingly different from the flawless face displayed in the museum. She may have died through violence, been buried in deliberate disgrace, and been erased from history by those who inherited power after her. DNA reveals her family connections. CT scans expose signs of trauma. Chemical studies uncover the hidden toxins surrounding her dynasty. Radar continues searching for the chamber where she may still rest. With every new discovery, another layer of the official story falls away. The face emerging beneath it, just like the limestone face hidden under the plaster, is not flawless. It is not peaceful. It is not eternal. It belongs to a real woman who lived through extraordinary events, faced dangerous enemies, and whose final chapter was almost completely erased from history. Perhaps the world's most famous sculpture is not simply the portrait of a beautiful queen. Perhaps it is the last surviving piece of evidence in a mystery that has never truly been solved. If this story has changed the way you see the face behind the glass, let me know what you think. Was Nefertiti murdered by political rivals? Is her tomb still hidden behind the walls of Tutankhamun's burial chamber? Or is she still waiting to be discovered in a place no one has dared to explore?